Hello, BookTube. The other day, David Murphy was feeling bored and restless. Either that or he's making another doomed attempt at regaining relevance. But one way or the other, he decided to make a very nosy tag and brewed it out into the universe. And since I love nosy tags, since I could ask all of you a million of these kinds of questions, I thought I would kick it down the road a bit by doing it myself. It's the 26 random questions tag, and most of them don't touch on books much, so we'll see. I will leave a link to David's extremely Grandpa Simpson video down below. You have to keep in mind that he is by far the oldest member of the OGBG, and we'll see how long this video goes. Question number 1 is, what was the most recent YouTube rabbit hole you went down? And for me, easily, it was overview, and opening videos for the new iPad Mini 6. Apple's come out with a new iPad Mini that has one weird notable drawback, which is that a kind of jellying wavering in the text sometimes on some models when you're scrolling on some sites at some times in some angles. As a number of tech commentators have pointed out, they themselves, whose whole job is to study tech, would not have noticed it if picky tech bros had not pointed it out online. And that's the only downside. All the others, everything else about the thing, makes it sound wonderful. Now, I have one iPad Mini. It's an iPad Mini 2nd generation. It's not being supported by Apple anymore. It's very slow. Especially the Wi-Fi finder on it is weak. So unless it's almost right on top of the modem, it will not find Wi-Fi. This new model is not cheap, but it's much lighter than the one that I have. It has support for an Apple Pencil. All the way along one side are the chargings for an Apple Pencil. It's much stronger. It's capable of all the new iOS gestures where you can multitask on a screen. My only considerations about I go down rabbit holes like this all the time, and just in case any of you were wondering, I know a lot of you are rolling your eyes now, I often go down those rabbit holes as a substitute for buying the tech. I don't just go out and buy every piece of tech that I see. I often do that as a substitute. I'm using that rabbit hole as a way to talk myself out of an impulsive purchase rather than to shore myself up for one. And when I was watching all of those videos about this new iPad Mini, in the new year, the iPad Mini's price, I'll be able to find it online for much less than it's selling for. I think it's $600 now. And that's without a case. That's without the Apple Pencil. That's without anything. I think it'll be much cheaper in the new year. I'll be able to find it for much less than that. The question is whether or not I want one. Now, the iPad Mini that I have now is a very companionable device. In some ways, the ideal form factor for a tablet, if you don't have failing eyes. Then in some ways the ideal form factor. But my iPad Mini, it's for instance, the perfect size for reading a book. As a number of tech commentators, tech dudes have pointed out, even though they don't read. They've all made a point of pointing that out. I'm not sure why. The one drawback that I would have with it would be how it would function as a work device. Would it be even theoretically possible to get any work done on it at all? And I think that'll boil down to script-to-text transcription programs, transcription apps, so that if I'm writing something out longhand, is it transcribing to typed text? And if so, is it doing accurately, or do I have to go proofread myself, in which case I'm adding a step instead of subtracting one? But the videos that I was watching were mainly designed just to see what that sort of thing is like, that kind of rabbit hole is like. I know, as a cold hard fact, I know what my next tech purchase should be. And it isn't an iPad Mini. At least not theoretically an iPad Mini. It should be a functioning iPhone. I have my iPhone 6S that does not work as a phone. It won't even make emergency calls. It won't even call 911. It does everything else. It does everything else that I want it to do. It is perfect for reading. It's perfect for filming videos. It's perfect for everything else. But it doesn't make phone calls. For that, I needed to buy a burner phone, straight out of Breaking Bad. I had to buy a $15 burner phone that came with its own SIM card and that I could set up automatically to get a disposable number. And I did, and it works just fine. That burner phone, I forget the manufacturer's name on it, but It's terrific. It's not just a burner phone. You could easily use it as your device. It's an Android device. I was able to download every single thing that I ever wanted on it. It works just fine. Takes a charge for a long time. But I'm an Apple fanboy. It's ridiculous for me to have two phones. That's just silly. I should either go to an Apple store and get them to make my iPhone 6S work, or I should get another iPhone and just assume that it will work when this one doesn't. But that should be my next tech purchase. It should not be an iPad mini. The only reason that I hesitate is because it is possible to use your iPad mini as a phone, which makes me automatically think, okay, well, if that's true, then why would you get a phone? Do you ever use your phone out on the go? No. Do you ever make phone calls out on the go? No, you don't. So maybe I'm going to have to look into that. There's a lot more research to be done. That rabbit hole is vast. I've looked at hundreds of videos. Oh my God, when this thing made a splash, every tech channel in the world did 10 videos on it. But there's still more in that rabbit hole to explore, especially whether or not I can use the thing as a phone. Even in a rudimentary sense, can I use it as a phone? If I put a SIM card in there and I get the wireless version of it, I don't see why I wouldn't be able to, but we shall see. Anyway, that's my most recent YouTube rabbit hole. Thankfully, it wasn't anything disgusting. Well, oftentimes it's disgusting. But in this case, it's just more tech, which maybe watching this channel, a lot of you would call disgusting. But I'm not making any more tech purchases in 2021. In 2022, I'm either going to get an iPad mini 6S, or 6, so that I have the latest iPad mini and don't have to think about updates, or I'm going to get a new iPhone. Now, ideally, I would like an iPhone 6S. But it could be that the reason my iPhone 6S doesn't make calls anymore is because it's an old phone, and not because there's anything other than that wrong with it. We shall see. Of course, I could get both. But anyway, question number 2. What song is currently stuck in your head? And here, David Murphy makes a long digression about how he doesn't like the term earworm. How it grosses him out. In which case, if the mere word grosses him out, then there's a scene in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, that he really shouldn't watch. Nevertheless, it is an earworm. That's the term for it. All sexy 20-somethings use that term. I am contractually obligated to use that term. And my current earworm is pretty bad. It's been there for a while. It's got staying power. And it arises out of a conversation that I had with a friend. A friend and I were talking about movies. This friend is one of a small cadre of people who really wants me to talk on camera more about movies. For every one person that leaves a totally insulting, stick to your lane, just dribble kind of comment about how stick to book reviewing, you're no good at movie reviewing. As if knowing that I do the one thing allows you to just sweepingly dismiss the points I make about the other thing. If I make a point about something, I don't care if it's custom jewelry. I will have thought about that point ahead of time. It won't just be that you can just sweep it off the table because it's not the thing I get paid to do. Either way, there's a small cadre of people who want me to do more of that, want you to talk more about movies. One friend of mine has been saying this for years. Says I've told him, YouTube is full of movie bros. They don't need another one. And he said, you're the only one the only person I ever talk to about movies, or especially read about movies, who writes about them like you were a book reviewer, rather than like you were singing for your supper to get a free preview. One way or another, we were talking about movies, and we hit upon a particular theme. We were talking about really good dramatic actors doing comedy turns successfully, as opposed to making a hash of things, as opposed to making an embarrassment of themselves. And I don't know how the conversation turned around to it, but I got around to Sigourney Weaver in Working Girl, a very 1980s movie about a young woman who enters the corporate workforce. She has a raging a-hole of a boss, played by Sigourney Weaver, and I guess the point of the movie is that if she works hard enough and cuts corners just enough and goes without a life of her own just long enough, she can become a raging a-hole boss. So only America would that be a dream in a movie. But that movie, oh my. That movie has a great comic turn by Sigourney Weaver, but it also has a song. Some of you will already know what I'm talking about. It's called New Jerusalem. And it was a vehicle for Carly Simon. Someone wrote it for her. And I spent a good part of a year when that movie came out trying to figure out what the lyrics to New Jerusalem actually mean. It turns out they're nonsense. They don't have any meaning. The meaning was that the songwriter wanted Carly Simon to go through the incredible vocal acrobatics involved in singing the song. And I would too. If I could pay Carly Simon to sing something with that kind of swoops and glissandos, I would gladly do it. However, it is a monstrous earworm. And it's all the worse when your earworm doesn't make any sense. When the earworm doesn't make any sense, that's just terrible. Anyway, that's my latest one, is New Jerusalem. Please, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't look it up on YouTube. It might get lodged in your mind as well. Question number 3 is, what kind of music do you listen to the most? And here I am tempted to give my usual response, all John Philip Sousa, all the time. But in actuality, it's classical. And it's not just classical, it's Baroque. And it's not mainly just Baroque, it's the 15 Baroque composers that made a living that you've never heard of. The Tartinis and whatnots of the Baroque world that no one aside from classical music aficionados has ever heard of. I can find them, long playing tracks of them on YouTube, and just play it forever. I just love it. Friends of mine have called it classical elevator music. I'd like to see them write some of it before they dismiss it. Then question number 4 is, what is something you need to get better at? Here I will stick close to David Murphy territory and say finances, which he himself is very good at, although he appears to be, from what I can tell, good at nothing else. He's really good at finances, and I'm terrible at it. Absolutely terrible at it. I'm sure that if I were to lay open my books to him, he'd just have a coronary. I'm sure they're a mess. Like most writers, I'm terrible with finances. And every year I tell myself, take a basic tutorial or hire someone, but get better at this, because you're only hurting yourself in the long run. But I do very, very little. Very little. I save money, but I do very little other than that, and I should be. Question number 5 is, do you set goals? What are your goals for the end of the year, next year? I want to stress here, I know I'll be saying this throughout this tag, I really want the rest of you to do this tag. I share with David a penchant for nosy questions, and I really want to know what a lot of you say about these things. As far as goals go, I don't make them. They impose themselves on me. I don't do otherwise than that. I should, like for instance with finances, and maybe a couple of others. First of all, I don't make any goals that cross the Terminator from one year to another. None whatsoever. So I don't have any plans of any kind for 2022. But in 2021, the goals that I tend to have, I make in the morning. So I read all night long, then maybe around 4 or 5, thereabouts, I will catch a little sleep, and then I wake up. And the bean wakes up, and we stretch and loll in bed, and I, in bed, will check my emails, the emails that came in overnight, not to answer them, but just to start thinking about them. What's the kind of shape in the inbox? That also helps at 5:15 in the morning. It also helps to glance at I don't know, I'm not saying this for everybody else, but for me, it helps to glance at my inbox in case there's something in there in the inbox at 5:15 that I absolutely do need to just take out the iPad and answer right away. It doesn't happen very often, but once a month it does. And it's good to do that. It's good to know that for me. I know that a lot of productivity bros would say, no, don't check your email until you've run your half K or whatever, or taken a gigantic sledgehammer and banged it on the ground while yelling like a Neanderthal or whatever the current stupid fad exercise is. But I do it. And then once we're done lolling and stretching, the bean and I go for our first morning walk. And then when I come back from that morning walk and I clean off and I clean up and I feed her, then I sit on my fainting couch and then I make my goals. And it's really not a question of making goals. It's really a question of looking them over. What work do I need to get done today? So I look at the list of things that I need to get done today. On that list at the top will be the things I need to get done today that I am being paid to do. The bottom of that need to get done list will be the things that I'm not getting paid for, but I still need to do them. Then there's a secondary list of things that I want to get done today, depending on how the first list goes. And I organize that as well in terms of need, top to bottom. And those are my goals for the day. And I, like all tussle-haired 20-somethings, I don't even think about tomorrow. So I don't tend to make plans that way at all. I look at each day and do that. Assuming, as I have assumed forever, since the Battle of Boyne, that when I sit down on my fainting couch and do that, the list of things, both lists of things, will never actually exceed the amount that I can get done in one day. And that has so far proven true. And it's a kind of a dream of mine for that not to be true anymore. But for now, if any of that made any sense, those are my goals. The morning's goals is the day's work. Uh, Question number 6. When was the last time you lost your temper? It was 3 years ago in January. And I think about it a lot. I was walking Frida. We were out on the sidewalk. A guy was coming towards us with a great big dog, big muscular dog on a leash. And the muscular dog on a leash wasn't giving off any negative signs. He was neutral, like most dogs are when they're approaching a dog they've never seen before. Frida, of course, wanted to meet him. And the guy walking the dog was letting him get closer and closer. I read the situation without proper caution. I read the situation as, well, with a dog that size, he would certainly be acting in a different way if the dog weren't friendly. And the dog is not giving off any unfriendly signs. And Frida herself is friendly. So I let them get nose to nose. I sort of nodded at the guy. I let the dogs get nose to nose. And right at that second, I realized, I saw in the posture of the other dog that he was going to attack Frida. He wasn't going to give any warning, which is usually something you have to train a dog to do, that he was going to attack her. In a split instant, I saw that that was true, and in a split instant, without thinking, I did what all of you parents will know you do without thinking. I put myself in the way of that danger. I interposed myself between that danger and my baby. And the dog bit me, bit my right thigh. Now, even while he was opening his mouth, even while he was lunging forward, his eyes were telling him what was happening. That he was not actually, he couldn't retract the gesture, but he realized that he wasn't going to bite Frida, that he was going to bite me. And we had been around each other long enough for him to start to know what that means. But it was too late to stop it. So he bit me. And then he pulled away. He'd already lessened what he could do a lot, so it wasn't a severe bite at all. It was a tooth mark. But it broke through the pants, it broke through the skin, left a bruise. And I pulled away, and the man pulled the dog away, and Frida pulled away. And by this point, the dog was trembling with fear. He realized that he had bitten me. And that is not anything that he or any other dog wants to do. He was trembling with confusion and fear. And the man was sort of just standing there. And he said to me, "Dude, are you all right?" And I was angry. Of course, I was angry. It hurt. And among other things, I was also angry that it even happened. I was angry at myself. I was angry at him. And I turned to him and angrily I said, "Your dog just bit me." In response to, "Are you all right?" "Of course I'm not all right. Your dog just bit me." And he looked at me with a blank, stoned expression on his face and said, "He's not my dog." Straight out of the Pink Panther. "He's not my dog." Just this totally feckless, clueless response. And for some reason, I don't know, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know, for some reason, that flew me into a rage. For an instant, I felt the doors open into rage, into wrath, which I must never open. I must never, ever do that. I must never do that. But for an instant, I did. I felt just, I don't know how to describe it. Your whole being just disappears in a wash of acid. And that's exactly what I felt when he said that. And I did something I must never, ever do. I turned to his dog, I shifted out of English, and I said, "Kill him." And then I just turned away. I turned to Frida. I hunched down over Frida. I knew she wasn't hurt, but I just turned away. I didn't care. I could hear what was happening. The dog launched itself at the man who was walking him. And for a few seconds, probably it was 5 seconds, it feels a lot longer, but it was probably a very short amount of time, I suddenly came to my senses and stood up and turned around. The dog had shredded the man, the arm of the right arm of the man's coat, and done a lot of damage to the man's right arm. The man was backed against the wall that buttressed the sidewalk. The dog was standing on him and clearly intended. I told the dog to stop, to stand, and the dog did, and the dog was still trembling, but the man now was, I don't even know how to describe it. He was out of his mind. And I just stared at him, and he groped with his other arm to pick up the dog's leash, grabbed the dog by the leash, and ran off. Which tells me that the dog was not his, and that he's afraid of whoever the dog belonged to. Imagine actually grabbing the leash of a dog that had just tried to kill you, that had just savaged your arm. Imagine doing that. And you wouldn't do that unless you were afraid of simply being executed if you came home without the dog. So anyway, he went away, and I was shaken for probably a month after that. In every possible way, I was shaken for probably a month after that. I kept hoping that I would see that guy again, preferably without the dog. But I never did. I've never seen him in this neighborhood. I'm sure that he's never been back here. But that was the last time I lost my temper. I was not happy about it at all. I was not happy that it happened with another dog. I was not happy that Frida saw it. And I'm hoping that it never happens again. Never. And if it does, well, then please, let it be just me. The very last thing I should ever do is the thing I did in that encounter. And I did it. So better just me. The time before that I lost my temper was 20 years before then. And it was just me. I lost my temper with a human being. And I was paying an out-of-court settlement garnished on my wages for 20 years. So I must never lose my temper is the moral of the story here. It must never, ever happen. Because it doesn't happen in a Hollywood way. It doesn't happen in a controlled way. I have no control over it. And that's a terrible feeling in retrospect. So let's move on to happier subjects. Question number 7. Do you swear too much? I don't swear at all. Every once in a while, if I'm tipsy, a couple of F-bombs will enter my conversation, but otherwise, no. David makes a point in his video that one of the reasons why you wouldn't is because you already know English. If you need to swear in order to make a point, well, then how well do you know your own native tongue? He invokes, he does a dicey move here, something that I thought was a little bit daring on his part. He invokes the radical mental illness haircut blue checkmark Twitter mob here, the radical left Twitter mob. He invokes them just briefly by saying that one of their hallmarks, they have many hallmarks, they are essentially identical photocopying carbon copies of each other in every single way, in mannerisms, in vocal tics, in the hairstyle. If for the 95% of them who are women, they have the mental illness haircut, which is shaved on one side, floppy on the other. They often dye their hair blue or green because they want to defeat the male gaze and make themselves look like circus freaks or whatever. And David is right, entirely right, that one of those universal characteristics is unnecessary forced swearing. They do it all the time. I'm surprised that David called out even that much, because he's already a target for them. If they ever knew he existed, they would cancel the daylights out of him. My own guess as to why they do that is because they don't actually believe anything they say. And forced, unnatural swearing is a way to simulate intensity, and it's the only way they know. When they talk about social justice, beliefs or programs or whatnot, greater inclusion, equity, and diversity or whatever, they don't care about any of those things. They only care about power. The power to change what you think and say. That's all they care about. And they know that they can't get that power wielding a truncheon, so they wield it with every other weapon that they have. But that's the only thing they actually care about. They actually don't care about how many blue-haired women are in Star Wars. They actually don't care about how many transsexuals are on The Wire or whatever. They don't actually care about any of the things of the causes that they profess. Instead, they just want the power to make you cower. And I think that's why they curse like stevedores. David's right about that. You can't get away from it. If you were to waste any time looking at these people on, for instance, Twitter, which is their natural habitat, you'd see it in a heartbeat. The NPC completely reproduced verbiage would be one thing. They all talk and write exactly the same thing. The forced Joss Whedon humor, the baby talk, the life damaging insinuations that have no basis in fact, no proof behind them. The tendency to immediately dox anyone who says that what they're saying doesn't have any proof behind it. Not just disagree, but immediately dox. They resort immediately to terrorism. The right-wing counterpart does not do that. I know, because I've baited both of them, and the responses between the two are night and day. Both noxious, but it's the radical blue-haired left, the mental illness haircut left, that resorts immediately to terrorism. They resort immediately to making you afraid. And they'll say it. They'll email you and say, scared? And then they'll wipe their account, as if you aren't taking screenshots, as if all of it isn't available. Anyway. No, in answer to the question, I don't swear too much. I scarcely swear at all. Question number 8. Do you spend too much money on shoes? No, I don't spend too much money on shoes. I've gone my sign for when I need a new pair of shoes, I only have one pair of shoes. And my sign for when I need a new pair of shoes is when literally my bestockinged foot is touching the ground. When I'm walking on a a Fred Flintstone style hole in my shoe, then I get a new pair of shoes. Other than that, no. And when I get a new pair of shoes, I pay $15. When David mentioned paying $80 and saying that's the low end for some of the shoes that he buys, that he'll spend $80 for a pair of shoes in order to what? Kowtow to fashion? In Minnesota? Good Lord. Do you know how many dollar books can be bought with $80? Anyway, no, I don't buy too many shoes. Number 9, what is the worst book you have ever read? The worst book that I have ever read is also the worst book ever written in any language by anyone. It is The Love Letter by Kathleen Sheen. Number 10, are you a homebody or are you more adventurous? Once upon a time, when I was David's age, I was adventurous. I traveled a lot. But I don't do that anymore. That ritual that I described of taking the bean out for a walk and then, and not just the bean, but my girls before her and then my boys, my beagles before that. You take them out, you crowd all back on the fainting couch, everybody settles down for a morning nap. I open my laptop, or in the olden days, take out a notebook and a pen and a book and get to work. And that work is so thrilling. It is just so thrilling. There's no drudgery about it at all. It's so thrilling that I consider that to be adventurous. I leave Frida, of course. I have errands that I do, but hardly ever. And my traveling days, unless I can travel with her, no, then I don't do it. Number 11, do you take naps? Naps. Only when circumstances force me to. Otherwise, no. I am otherwise the way that David describes, where when I'm up, I'm up. I've got lots and lots to do, so I'm ready to go. And just wanting more time in the day. So I'm not like the person he describes in his tag, where he was talking with someone who just told him, well, now that I've done with my morning and my mid-morning, I'm going to go home and take a nap. I'm going to go unconscious for a few hours out of a perfectly good afternoon when I'm already awake and dressed and whatnot. So no, not unless I can help it. Number 12, have you ever been to Minnesota, the greatest state in the Union? I have been to Minnesota, every inch of Minnesota. A cold, sleety, rainy, snowy, boggish wasteland of a territory that should never have been admitted to the Union. And is it any wonder that Minnesotans drink too much? Is it any wonder that they have whole pats of butter for breakfast? Is it any wonder, in other words, that they'll do anything to dull the pain of the winterish purgatory where they live? So no, I have been to Minnesota. I will never be going back to Minnesota. Instead, I actually, by coincidence, live in the greatest state in the Union, the great state of Massachusetts. Number 13, have you ever tried to emulate someone? No, I have not. Why would I try to emulate someone when I am already me? It doesn't make any sense. Number 14, what is the worst food you have ever eaten? It's nasi lemak. It's a kind of slurry that you get. It's a kind of a sticky, horrible slurry that you get in Kuala Lumpur. You get it all over Malaysia, and it's apple pie. Everybody eats it. It's unavoidable at any big meal, especially if you have like 10 courses. It's unavoidable, and it's just gross. It's just grotesque. It's like if you take, for me, it's like if you were to take a really nice mixed combo rice entree here in America, and then dump it into the gutter, and then have snow and slush and gasoline and rainwater and dirt and everything collect over it, and then you trowel it up and pour it onto somebody's plate with a little ball of rice. It's just disgusting. I had a hard time getting away from it when I lived anywhere where it was currency. Number 15 is, do you enjoy bars? What kind? Are you or have you ever been a regular at one? And here David Murphy, of course, predictably goes on and is a hymn of praise about dive bars. Now, in my experience, I'm not sure if this is true with David, but in my experience, dive bar is always code for smoking. And that's disgusting. It's revolting. And it's also deadly. It kills everyone who does it. And it also kills everyone who's anywhere around them. I know that Big Tobacco spent somewhere upwards of $270 million to coin and then promulgate the phrase secondhand smoke, specifically so that it would connote weak, something secondhand, so it's not as strong as quote-unquote firsthand. That's absolutely not true. The chemicals are just as deadly, whether you ingest them directly or whether you ingest them next to someone who's ingesting them directly. They're just as deadly. They're going to give you cancer just as much as if you ingest them directly yourself. It's just that if that fact were to be widely known, well, then advocacy groups would have an even bigger cudgel to use against big tobacco than they already have. And the one they have is already huge, which is that the product kills everyone who uses it. If in addition to that, it were widely known that it also kills anyone around them, then even big tobacco would have a hard time buying its way out of that one, which is why they have suborned and adulterated all kinds of tests, all kinds of clinical trials and tests and whatnot, in order to produce fake documentary evidence that there is a drastic drop-off in danger. There isn't. And in the recent background of every so-called legitimate scientist who ever put their name to any study that says there is, you will find an all-expense-paid trip to the U.S. Virgin Islands for a conference. You will find a pool in the backyard that's suddenly paid for. You will find a chemo session that's suddenly affordable. You will find something like that in the background of every one of those bought and paid for fraud doctors. The legitimate science says that this is just universally addictive and universally deadly. And that, for me, has always been code for dive bars. When people say, hey, you want to go to a dive bar, what they mean is, hey, do you want to go smoke indoors? Now, I don't know if that's true in Minnesota. I have no idea how many places in America it's true. But even if you take that out, I've never really understood. I know this is kind of weird coming from somebody with a name like Donoghue, but I've never really understood the appeal of bars. You go and overpay in order to drink basically in boredom around a bunch of strangers, most of whom you're going to find disaffecting. And when it's all over and you've got your load on and you're either tipsy or drunk, well, then what happens? Well, then it's 2 a.m. and you're out on a cold sidewalk and you're every bad decision you could possibly make between you and your bed. I've never understood and you're hugely poorer for it. I've never understood the appeal, as opposed to getting a couple of gigantic jugs or nowadays boxes of wine and drinking with friends at home. I've never understood why the one has appeal and the other doesn't. So I've never been a regular at a bar. No, I've scarcely ever gone to bars in my life. But I do want to stick up for something that David mentions, which is the appeal of being a regular. It is extremely appealing to be a regular somewhere. I try always to be a regular at all the places that I go, whether it's the grocery store or the bodega or the library or the bookstore or the newsroom, whatever it is. I try only to do. I'm a creature of routine anyway. I try to be a regular because there are all kinds of intangible benefits that you get if you're a regular somewhere. No one's going to skim anything for you. But there's a lot of, it's a very welcoming feeling to walk into a commercial establishment and have it not feel that way, have everyone know you. So I do stick up for that, but not bars, and especially not dive bars. Sorry. Question number 16, have you ever been hungover? No. Question number 17. When was the last time you laughed out loud while reading? Oh my God. It was just the other day, but unfortunately, unlike David gives the example of H.L. Mencken, who does sometimes crack people up. He even cracks me up. I can't stand him. I generally can't stand him. David loves him. I generally can't stand him. To me, he seems like a poor man's Mark Twain. And Mark Twain can make me laugh out loud sometimes, but the laughing out loud that I do on a regular basis, at least 2 or 3 times a week, is not happy laughter. It's more like bitter, hateful laughter, where I'm reading a book, a self-published book, that is so bad that the howlers that it's coming out with are just involuntarily funny, even though I mainly want to kill the author. So I've laughed out loud while reading, but not with joy. Number 18 is, how would you label or describe yourself politically? Well, that is the big question, isn't it, when it comes to me? I've had, in the 5 years almost that I've had this channel, I've had innumerable people make innumerable attempts to answer this question on my behalf. A lot of people, most of them I would say, just automatically say, okay, he's from Boston, so he's a classic liberal. And I can guess what he thinks about Social Security or paid family leave or solving the homeless problem or abortion or public health or anything like that. I can guess what he thinks about all that stuff because he's from Boston. And there have been some people who have said just the opposite. There have been some people who've seen me go after the aforementioned blue checkmark crowd of Twitter scolds. I hate them. I hate them a lot worse than their right-wing counterparts. And some people have seen me do that and assumed, okay, well, then he's a knuckle-dragging, paleo-conservative Rush Limbaugh type figure. And I have told both those people those types of people when they make those guesses that they are wrong. they are wrong. If I ever think that it's a good idea to go to expound on my own personal politics on YouTube, you'll be the first to know. Number 18 is, how would you label or describe yours? Oh wait, we already got to that. I'm sticking to it because you will not guess it. No matter what, you will not guess it. And if you do, you won't think I mean it. Number 19 is, what was the last movie you watched? I watched a screener for Joel Coen's production of The Tragedy of Macbeth. Denzel Washington, a big Hollywood style. I don't know if it'll get a widescreen release, but a big production of Shakespeare's Macbeth. It was very, very good. Very, very good. I need to watch it a few more times, as is usually true with movie versions of Shakespeare. I need to watch them a few more times before I know really what I think. But I don't know when it's coming out. I think this December. Those of you who are Shakespeare fans, I'd strongly urge you to go and see it. I think there's enough in it so I can say right now you will definitely want to see it. Number 20, do you want kids? Do you wish you had kids? If you have kids, give a piece of advice. Deb and I have never chosen to keep any of the children that she has squirted out. Sometimes she'll have 6 at a time. We bring them all to the dump. Or we trade them to passing tradesmen for Magic the Gathering cards. And it's always seemed like a good idea. Let them fend for themselves. They're going to find out the world's a tough place soon enough anyway. But as for parenting advice, well, I don't have any parenting advice for little kids, obviously. But I have parenting advice for teenage boys. I have a lot of parenting advice for teenage boys. There's nobody, in my opinion, who knows how to parent a teenage boy better than I do. I've never had one of my own, but I've had plenty who weren't my own, plenty of them. And I know how to deal with them. I am fluent in their view of the world. And the sad part is that usually by the point that they get into their teens, their fathers, their actual biological fathers, are not anymore able to speak their language. The classic stereotypical divide between teenage sons and their fathers. That is a very real thing, and I lay the fault of it mostly at the door of the fathers, who have just allowed themselves to stiffen in every way. They've allowed themselves to just become boring old guys in almost every way. But the way that hurts the worst, the way that actually has collateral damage, is that they are no longer able to talk to their sons. Somehow or other, I have been spared that, and I've had a great deal of fun in my life because of that. But that's the only, I could give you lots and lots of parenting advice there, but not for little kids. Little kids baffle me, as I think they do their own parents. I can just hear the book collectors out there screaming because of the sun hitting these books. Sorry about it. If I cared about such things, I would care about such things. Let's see here. Question number 21. Do you get along with your siblings? No. Question number 22. What is a book you have a serious issue with but love? Well, there are quite a few. The one I always go to on this channel is Robert Harris's book, or Thomas Harris's book, Hannibal. His big novel, Hannibal, which is absolutely brilliant. It's about Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling, and it's absolutely brilliant. Even for Harris. Brilliant. Until the end of the book, until the last 30 pages, which are not just bad, but a travesty. Just the power to anger even now. So that's always my go-to. I have an issue with that book because the ending is always coming up. I reread it all the time, though, because it is beautiful. Number 23 is, what is your favorite theme song to a movie and or TV show? That would, of course, be St. Elsewhere. A great theme song. I wish it were my current earworm, but it's not. Question number 24, do you like your job? If you switched careers, what would you do? I love my job. I'm a writer. And I love that. If I switched my jobs, I certainly wouldn't switch it to anything else. It would still be writing. But I could imagine, in a daydream kind of sense, that I would switch from being a reviewer, which is mostly what I am, to being a syndicated columnist. I've mentioned that on this channel before. To write a column every week that goes out and actually makes me enough money to live on. As opposed to reviewing everything that moves. Not that I'm complaining. I love reviewing. Absolutely love it. But if I were to make a change, if I had to, being a paid syndicated columnist would be great. Which, it gets closer and closer to happening if you have a paper in your own hometown that needs a columnist. You feel free to get in touch with me. Question number 25 is, what is something you love about the city you live in? Virtually everything. Virtually everything about Boston. It is famously walkable. It's the inner parts of it, the historic parts of it are often compacted together. But everything else about it too. The tenor, the people, everything. The libraries, the bookstores, the shops of all kinds, the buildings and parks and statues that I know so well. I've known them for so long that they feel like parts of my own body. Uh, there's virtually nothing that I don't love about Boston. And finally, question number 26. Who is your celebrity crush? I don't have a celebrity crush. Again, I want to ask. I want to point out, I'm already me. So why would I have a celebrity crush? But anyway, that is the 26 random questions tag. And of course, naturally, since I'm as nosy as David is, I think you should all do this. So feel free. I'm not going to tag anybody specifically. If you watch this video, you're tagged. Thank you, BookTube.